So thanks for coming to our first Science Engagement in Action webinar. This is going to be a series where we highlight some science engagement in action that is going on either in West Virginia or elsewhere. And this will allow people that are interested in science engagement or practicing science engagement to learn from each other, to see what works, what doesn't work, what partners scientists are building to make sure that science is truly serving society and having a societal impact. And the local science engagement network is something that was just started about a year ago. And this is a program that was initiated by the AAAS with the goal to increase basically facilitate more of a bridge between science and the public. And so I was selected as a liaison for West Virginia to the AAAS to start this here, and have been working with a team of amazing researchers so far just at WVU at building this network and letting the network evolve and grow as the people who are interested, who come here, want to see it evolve. So it doesn't have, the mission is very broad and just creating a learning network of scientists that are interested in science engagement and fostering collaboration between scientists and the public. And the goal is to eventually allow this to improve the lives of West Virginians. And so it's broad so that we can do what we want with it. And with that, I am going to pass the torch over to Trina Wafel. She came to the local science engagement network early on, very enthusiastic science advocate that is kind of an example of a role that we're asking people to play coming into this network, seeing, what you think that scientists and the public can benefit from, and then taking some sort of leadership role within the network, whatever that might look like. And so Trina has organized this webinar today and kind of come up with the vision and idea for this webinar today. So thanks for being here, and thank you, Trina.
Thank you, Brooke. Yeah, I'm really excited about LSEN. I like to call it LSEN. So, and I think it's a fabulous program. And Brooke, you're doing a great job, because I know this is all volunteer. We're all volunteers. And so you really are running with this. So I want to say good afternoon to most everybody, but I think I see a couple of people who might be still good morning in the list of participants. I'm an assistant director at the WVU Institute for Sustainability and Energy Research. We're part of this transformation reorganized out of what was the Energy Institute. We work with faculty across WVU and with collaborators regionally and nationally to develop robust research programs that are around energy and sustainability, to benefit West Virginia, the region, and the nation. Recently, I have worked very actively with Extension, and most recently with the Center for Community Engagement. I thought that Tony and Kristi would be great speakers for us. So Kristi Wood-Turner serves as the Assistant Dean of Engagement for the WVU Division of Land Grant Engagement, and she is the Director for the Center for Community Engagement. With 21 years of experience in the field, Kristi has made tremendous contributions to building community engagement structures, creating community connections, focusing on volunteerism, and supporting social advocacy for the students at West Virginia University. And she brings her passion and energy for education, service, equality, and community to everything she's done. And I've partnered with her most recently on a very large, like $500 million effort being led by GTI Energy for a methane emission reduction program, in which we're partnering with Marshall as co-leads for the Appalachian region. So that proposal just went in this fall. And that could bring tens of millions. I think off the top of my head, I'm thinking like at least $49 million to this region. So that could be very impactful to reduce one of the most potent greenhouse gases there is out there, get that out of our systems. And then Tony Michael serves as the program director for family and community development and extension. He earned his bachelor's and master's degree in English, near and dear to my heart, and his Juris Doctor degree from the WVU College of Law. He has long-standing relationships with labor unions in West Virginia. And he's a native of Talcott in Summers County. You can't get more rural than that, I don't think. He brings a wealth of pride for his state and its people to everything he does. And he is my co-PI on this energy transition jobs roadmap, and I couldn't do it without him. So each of our speakers will speak for about 10 minutes, after which we'll do a Q&A session. And then we're going to try a community benefits challenge where you listeners can describe what your particular area of research is and see what Tony and Kristi might come up with on the fly as an idea that could be a community benefit. We thought that might be a fun challenge. So, with that, I'm going to turn this over to Kristi.
All right. I want to start off by saying all of that was fantastic. Thank you, Trina. But the energy piece, I got to leave that one at the door today because unfortunately I'm in the midst of battling a really bad bout of COVID right now. But this work, this experience, and this information is just so critical that it deserves as much as I could pull out of my energy right now. So I'm going to try to give that to you. So thank you very much. And thanks, Tony, for putting up the slide. I want to start by saying, this is a really big discussion. This topic is big in the sense of the depth of engagement, and it's big in the sense of how we define the engagement we're looking for within the community. So Tony and I are going to kind of give you some thoughts and ideas. A lot of data on our slides is something you may refer back to. It may not get touched on necessarily in our presentation, but we felt like we wanted to give you some pieces to start with. So first thing I want to do is introduce our division for land grant engagement. Really excited to have kicked this division off on the 1st of July of this year. It is a really innovative way to bring in areas that serve our land grant mission in various ways. We have an academic component of the division, and that is what is previously known as the Davis College of Agriculture and Natural Resources and Design. It now is the Davis College of Agriculture and Natural Resources. That is our academic arm. Lots of amazing work being done academically with students and degree programs through that college. We also have extension. So all of you that know and understand the power of our extension service, the breadth of it throughout the state of West Virginia and the expertise that lies within it, that is part of this division as well. And then we are lucky enough to also add into this unique combination the Center for Community Engagement, of which I get to direct. And I say I get to because it is such a blessing. We have an amazing, extraordinary team that are experts in many areas and open resources to everybody at the university, as well as WVU Tech and Potomac State. So there are the divisions there. I encourage you to check out the website. Each unit really has a lot to bring together. And as a group, we're really making a larger impact. Okay, so what is community engagement? One of the things that I'm working on currently, after about 24 years in the field of community engagement, my focus has mostly been on learning outcomes and student development and growth through community orientation. At the Center for Community Engagement, we help partnerships from the community and the university work. Period. So we've been doing that for many years. But recently, and with the help and promotion from Trina and some encouragement from others looking for this field, we realized how much of the information that we have used to share this kind of reciprocal benefit with students, faculty, and staff and the community is also something that our researchers and our scientists here at WVU can utilize and use in their process of providing and implementing the information that they get from their research. It is a really big piece of our large DOE grants. A lot of the other grants are now requiring either a societal benefit or a community benefits plan. These are things that we could help and support. So we are delving into that experience. Action, not one stop, but action with a community-based organization is the key to community engagement, that generically defined, but making sure that you're involved constantly, and it's many pieces. It's not just one statement that includes the engagement. So you could see community engagement is more of an active statement than just one defined information. And then, okay, I'm like, yeah, thank you. I'm sorry. Researchers tend to concur that community engagement is community-centered orientation. So this lies within the various communities that you represent. And even within one scientific research project, there could be multiple communities impacted. So as we go through what is needed to be done, consider this for each community separately and then holistically towards the end. Okay, thanks, Tony. So where do we start when we're looking to be in the communities and with the communities? Many of this is going to come from relationships that you have built or that you have nurtured over the years. A collaborative partnership is key. You want to make sure that you have people at the table who are engaged in various ways in the work that you're doing. There needs to be a clear and defined mutual benefit, and not a mutual benefit that we as the institution or as the researcher says is the benefit for the community, but a benefit that we both agree, the community and the institution, is a benefit to us. So the community needs to have a strong voice in that. Trust and respect is obvious. Without that, we have seen and continue to see more of a separation than a combination of the work and the efforts that we're doing. So we really need to work hard to put trust and respect first when we're thinking about how we go into a partnership with the community. A cultural competency is really important. We all love the state of West Virginia. And if you were born and raised here, you do understand that there are 55 different cultures in this state. And literally moving from 15 minutes down the road, you have entered a brand new culture. And we love our individual county cultures. We love to tell people what county we're from, as opposed to sometimes even what city. So it's really important that we understand and represent the communities that we are going to be in, even outside of West Virginia. Transparency and communication, always key. We know that that is the most important thing. And communication, we will talk about a little bit more, but that communication needs to be at the level that we all want to interpret or can interpret that information. So we need to understand as researchers, there may be folks in the community who understand what we're doing, but if we use language that they're not familiar with, we may not get that clear communication that we want. So always representing ourselves and the voices of the community together so that we're clear that we understand what each other is saying. That's really important. One big tip is always remember that outside of your research, you are also a part of the community. So you are a community member. In this capacity, you're working as a researcher, but if you could step back out of that and ask yourself how you would expect to be included in this type of research yourself, if you were the community member, that can really get you off on a really good start with the communities you're in. So what does engagement plans include? These are broad and they do vary. You want to make sure that you're focused on your FOA or the requirements for what it is that you're doing. But in general, you want to have descriptions of how stakeholders will be identified and why. So who are the people being impacted? And make sure that we are really thoughtful, intentional, and in the fact that we are looking beyond what is already out there. So sometimes voices are louder than others. We want to make sure we're getting every voice, even the ones that are not as loud. Mechanisms for continued and ongoing engagement, those need to be in place. How are we going to detail, based on the audience's way of knowing, how are we going to detail to them the constant ongoing engagement? Is this a community that works off of social media? Is this which Mon County is one. Is this a community that works off of in-person handshakes and city hall meetings and panels? What type of community, what type of outcome are we expecting? And then how do we put those mechanisms in place to be sure that we target that? Plans for community access to data, easy access using common language. Once again, putting something up there that everybody can go through and use and see and start telling their stories through that data. Plans for negotiating benefits, design, outcomes, real examples of how voice is included. So in these plans or in this intent as you're designing your scientific research, it has got to be very clear that you have used a real example of how this voice is going to be included. Not just I'm going to bring them to the table, but from that table, how are you actually going to take those words and put them into your design, right? So that's very important. And the more clear and detailed you could get in these plans on that piece, the better you will do in that area. Methods of engaging stakeholders and documenting discussions is also very important. It falls in line with the one above. We need to know, not only are you saying you will meet with the community, but once you do, how does that information get translated into your actual work plan? Community and stakeholder engagement is about relationship building. This deserves its own slide. This is very, very important. We need to understand who we are working with and why. This is alongside others, not for others, not even sometimes with others. We are working alongside others. So in order to do solid work with any relationship you have in life, you must build the strength in that relationship, understand what their needs are, understand what their fears are, have them understand what your goals are and why you are doing the work you're doing, and then that relationship can really build. So in general, what are some specific steps if we kind of break it down and above kind of that framework? We need to seek to understand the community culture and need. It is oftentimes misunderstood that we could sit in another state, another county, another community, and then project what we think that community may be or may need. We often find ourselves doing that based on the time that we're crunched to get some of this work put in. But I highly encourage you not to rush this piece. It is really important that you understand who you're working with and that they have had the opportunity to tell you who they are, and do not just reflect what you think you understand about a community. Identify the stakeholders, discuss mutual goals. These are things that also implement into the other slides that I said. Choose appropriate methods for reaching these goals. This may be something that the community needs a little help with understanding how you get there, because this is where your education and your methods come to be, but they would be really interested. And this is a really great place to find that kind of synergy. Identify specific roles. Give a community member a role in your research. Let them be a part of the activities and the engagement in more of a leadership style. That will really enhance the work you're doing. And identify feedback strategies that support this evaluation. One of the keys to especially the DOE grants right now is the Justice Sporty Initiative. I am sure I'm speaking to the choir, but just in case, I wanted to throw this up on the screen. 40% of the benefits of the federally invested funds flow to disadvantaged communities. And defined there. You can find that defined on the DOE. I have done some work now evaluating community benefits plans for the Department of Energy. This has been an amazing step in my learning and my experience of how things work. One of the critical pieces that I've learned early on is wording and language and definition is something that we're still making sure that we have to check ourselves to make sure we understand. A lot of the work you'll hear, which Tony's gonna talk about a little bit, is workforce development. That is critically important to community benefits planning. How are we going to introduce, educate, and prepare a group of community members to take on the work that might be being done in the community? Critically important. That in itself is different from the actual engaging with the discussion of general population folks. This may be people who would never want one of those jobs or need one of those jobs, but have something to say and some input to put in. So we want to make sure, no matter where we're looking for the engagement or what our very specific outcome is, that we are including all the elements that we know, ethical considerations, the diversity considerations. We're including all of that in our plan as we design how this interaction will work, which with the outcome of most likely being workforce development. But we need to make sure we're clear on that. One of the really great things I saw in one of my reviews was, it wasn't intentional at the beginning, but as they were kind of developing the community benefits plan and talking to the communities about the workforce and how they're going to really move forward in this, a lot of great information, but two things stood out that really wasn't thought about as much. And that is, the housing prices in the area and childcare. If we are going to create a workforce, that's wonderful. Where will they live and how will their children receive care? So this group in particular decided to incorporate their science with the community benefit and that kind of social science, and they are creating a child care center that will then benefit some of these folks and working on some community housing. So really cool things can happen if you're listening and if we put the community's voice at the level that it really needs to be to respect the research. Okay, this is just for another reference later. Too much on the information now, but check this out if you are doing something with the Department of Energy. Pretty good details down to the nitty-gritty of what you need to write on that plan. And I'm happy to talk to anybody about that. Like I said, I've had a little bit more experience in the last year about this, so I feel confident. Next. All right. I think we're close to being done here, so I'm going to try to push my voice through it. Again, I apologize, but some of the core values to reflect on throughout: careful planning. I would even go as far as to say intentional planning and preparation is key. Inclusion and demographic diversity is a must. Collaboration and shared purpose. Start every conversation off with your why. Why do we feel like this research is important? What will it do down the road? What will it do tomorrow? What are these kind of conversations that you need to have so that you can start off with a shared purpose and everybody has that opportunity to get excited and feel motivated about the work you're doing? Openness and learning. Feel free to say, I don't know that answer. I don't understand that piece of the engagement. Can you help me find somebody who could clarify XYZ, right? These are open, honest conversations, because if we start that way, throughout the entire process of your research, you will have that safety net of being able to say, let me just go back and ask. You know, nobody here is going to say anything if I go back and say, hey, I don't know the answer to this. Can you help me? Transparency and trust, as we mentioned many, many times, got to be clear. The communities start with you, they engage with you, they give their time, they give their energy. We just need to make sure that we trust that they trust that we are going to give that back. Even if we don't receive the grant funding or we are unable to complete the scientific research or the project, we need to let them know. They need to be a part of that conclusion. And maybe they have some ideas for the future of how you could come back in later if this changes. But if we leave it as is and just drop off, the potential is there for them not to want to engage with the institution again. So we have to be very careful, not only of our research and our role and our impact, but how this might impact other researchers, other faculty coming into this field later down the road in that same community. Impact and action, critical. We want to make sure it's happening. We make sure we're doing this with our expertise and the best of our ability, and sustain that engagement and that participatory culture throughout. Invite them to the meetings that you have to check in. Invite them to come, hey, just come on a day and visit what we're doing today, where we're at with the project. Keep them engaged, keep them participating throughout the process, not just at the beginning for the plan and not just at the end to wrap up. 3 C's, an easy way to remember a successful plan. Now, obviously, you can see there's lots of details in there, but if you collaborate, consult, and communicate, you are already set on a really good path to make sure that you have a successful plan when you submit. So I just want to mention a few things. Tony's really going to elaborate on this more, but I just want to mention that WVU has so many amazing community engagement resources. As you know, we are classified with the elective Carnegie classification for community engagement. We have been since 2010. We are up for renewal this year. So in April, we will be putting in our renewal for the classification to continue. It's absolutely amazing to look at the work collectively that we're doing. If anybody is interested, check with me. I will have all that information. I hope to put out reports in April when I submit, but really amazing things happening, experts all over the campus. In particular, I want to highlight Extension, which Tony's going to grab on and elaborate. The Center for Community Engagement, these are experts in student engagement and nonprofit participation. If you want to partner in a way that your students can benefit, that you're using your learning outcomes or curricular goals and outcomes into this service project, this center has the experts that makes that happen. I'm so proud of the work they do, and the curriculum understanding and the academic depth that the experts in our center has that can connect these things and give our students the bonus on the other side is just unbelievable. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I believe that we're a higher ed institution, and at any point, if we can engage students in the learning and the experience and the outset of a project all the way through those messy big projects to the end, we then create better mountaineers at the end of the day. So we're really excited of the work we do with students at the center and more. And then Wiser, of course, you heard from Trina on Wiser, critically amazing resource we have. We have a website on the way where we're going to try to pull all this information together for you. Stay tuned for that. It's coming. Other institutes there's other, not institutions, but there's other institutes on campus, other units on campus that do similar focused work, and they could provide guidance as well. So check out some of those other places that are doing community engaged work. Also, we have faculty experts, current community engaged scholars on campus that have done this work for their whole career. They can help you not only connect this to the community, but connect your work to your publications and to your promotion, and also to connect this to your students in terms of scholarship. So really great opportunities on campus. No need to look any further than your campus in front of you, but sometimes you have to ask the questions. Feel free to start here with me if you need to, and I will be happy to share everything I know about the community engagement piece of your research, because I appreciate more than anything the science and the expertise you bring to our state is absolutely phenomenal. My piece is not necessarily the science, but as Trina knows, I will try to keep up. But my piece is how that community reaction and engagement happens. And I'm super excited to be here today and happy to have you guys reach out if you can. On that note, I think I will hand it over to Tony. Thank you all for putting up with my voice. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Kristi, and thank you for pushing through to be able to be with us today. So briefly on extension, if you're not familiar, we have a motto now, tagline, whatever you want to call it, but our mission is improving lives and livelihoods for all West Virginians. And so one of the key things to consider as we're talking about research-based community benefits is how do we then use extension as that arm into these communities? As Trina noted at the outset, we are in every county. We have an office in every county across the state. We have faculty that are engaged in faculty work all across the state, so teaching, research, and service. To be clear, the research that our faculty do is applied research. So one of the key considerations as you're thinking about your research is who might you connect with within extension, right? Because we're talking about faculty agents that I'll get to in a bit that are actually on the ground. We also have specialists, most of whom are right here on the main campus at WVU. If you're not familiar with extension, this is a great little slide to better understand extension. Extension is absolutely a part of WVU. We are actually a part of all land grant institutions, and there are a number of those. Some we call 1862s like WVU, some are 1890s, which are historically black colleges and universities. All 1890s are HBCUs, not all HBCUs are 1890s. And then we also have 1994s, which are our tribal extension programs. So just a little bit about extension there. One key for us is that we are funded differently than most of the rest of the university. In some respects, you could say all the university receives federal funds. It does. We receive specific funds called Smith-Lever funds that only support our extension outreach and engagement activity. So in other words, Smith-Lever funds cannot be used for us to teach a credit course, for instance. We also receive community-based funds. So our counties have some skin in the game. They provide funding in the way of in-kind contributions, such as providing office space, resources, et cetera. But there's also direct cost share for some of those counties based on our county funding formula and those types of things. So we receive state appropriations, we receive WVU funding that we call our central funding along with the state appropriation. And so to be clear about the state appropriation versus WVU funding, the state is only required to provide a federal match. WVU provides a much higher level of funding to support our extension programming because they value the work that extension does in the community. So one easy way to think about extension is it is an extension of the university's resources, research, right, training, education, et cetera, into the communities. And that's why we have an office in every county. So the reality is that we are embedded in the fabric of our communities, extension is, and engagement is. And that's one of the things that, to Kristi's credit, to Dean Atiles, his credit, and to the credit of so many of our research partners across campus, right, there is this commitment to make sure that we weave WVU into those communities. Hence, we're the flagship institution. And that's not taking anything away from another, but we are the 1862 land grant, the largest university of the state. So Kristi had mentioned some of this before, but we're really focused on positive community relationships and meaningful public involvement. You have to imagine, so for instance, one of the things that people don't necessarily know about Extension is that the community has input on our faculty, on our positions. And so we have to live by many of the values that Kristi shared earlier. In Extension, there's a very popular, mostly in the ag and natural resources arena. I see Brooke smiling there. If you're not at the table, so what? Well, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so often you have to think about the state is really been an extraction state. We've extracted resources, right? Whether it was wood, whether it was coal, natural gas. And in the recent years, we've seen an extraction. Many of you have probably heard of the brain drain, right? It's the extraction of your most talented people. And so if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. We want to make sure that our communities are at the table. And so one of the things that's really important is educating stakeholders, but understand that, you know, a cold call to someone that is not effective, right? And that's Kristi talking earlier about these building relationships. One thing that we hope that that LSEN can maybe capitalize on is that we have embedded faculty in the communities, so they can be our conduit to those relationships, right? We can build on the relationships that they have. Now, again, we're not talking about extraction, so we want to make sure that there's mutual benefit there. But as our faculty have teaching, research, and service responsibilities, and many of them have either grown up or are now embedded in the communities where they work. And so Kristi's recommendation earlier about, hey, what would you do as part of this community? The faculty are part of the community. So it's really easy, I think, to connect with them and then help them be a conduit of additional information, resources, opportunities, but also to elicit more information from them. That encourage public involvement, Kristi's talked a lot about, that capture input and feedback. Again, we are doing this on a continual basis. The CCE is doing this on a continual basis. Across the university, right, we have a number of embedded, what we might consider community engaged scholars, but it doesn't necessarily mean that community engaged scholarship is widely understood or widely applied. So that's one of the reasons that we really appreciate the invitation to share with you here today. And that's so, so important for that follow-up and reporting back, because otherwise what happens is, well, WVU was here a few years ago, and we never heard anything about that. You know, imagine a community who may have partnered with someone we were talking about water quality earlier. So imagine a community that has been struggling with their water quality and has engaged in this research, et cetera. And now they've been told that, you know, hey, whenever we have more, we'll be back. And then no one ever returns, right? So we want to make sure that we don't engage in that. When to begin? Now. So it is a process, as Kristi went through. Think about those WVU Extension resources. We have directors. There are 3 directors in our programming: 4-H youth development, agriculture and natural resources, I mentioned, and in community development or family and community development here. I noted this one differentiation earlier, the campus faculty, which we call specialists, or the county-based faculty agents. We do have embedded specialists, but they are very few and far between. But specialists, well, for instance, I started as a WVU Extension specialist. And that means you have an area of focus, but it's not the only thing that you do. So I started off as a labor and employment law specialist. And my job at that time was to work with employers, employees, and labor unions on understanding, honestly, it's been so long ago, the Family Medical Leave Act was a huge, huge problem for employers, employees, and unions. And so that was one of the areas that I started really working in. And now it's so embedded that the work has changed. So we moved to leadership and other things. But we do have specialists. So an example here would be a rural economist. We have community engagement specialists. You know, this is particularly the unit that I work in. So what is it that you might need? And we can see, is there someone who is doing that particular work? And sometimes there is not. We've had to share with faculty and communities alike that while we don't have anyone working in a specific area, we can find someone. And then those community-based faculty agents, we have at least one faculty member that is responsible for a county/community, but sometimes there are multiple. And when you think about those three different areas, maybe you really need someone who is a youth development agent to help you with some of your research. We can connect you with the right person. Just that build relationships now piece will make those slides available. One key consideration, and Kristi mentioned the cultural competence piece. We've talked about the community benefits, but it's about equity. Sometimes when people think about a community, they don't necessarily think as broadly as they could or should, right? And that's that. Go back to that question. Go back to that question of who's at the table and who's not. Because if you just ask yourself that realistic question, you start seeing who's not around the room, right, sharing their perspective, and it might be very critical. Just real brief, so Trina mentioned some of the ways that we've been involved. One of the grants that Extension has been working with is an ARC grant looking at transportation challenges and in the tri-state area, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. And obviously, it's not across the entire state, right? It's a specific region. But as we were looking at that, one key question was, all right, who is not going to be represented here? And each state had to do a workshop. As an example, when we scheduled our workshop, we reached out to key folks. One of the things that we found immediately is that we could not get some people who had a disability to town, because either there was no public transportation to bring them here from Fairmont, just down the road. Couldn't bring them here from Fairmont because there's no public transportation, and the people on whom they typically rely on for transportation are working during the time of the workshop. So again, you can easily see, well, we offered a workshop, they couldn't make it. Maybe the workshop needed to be offered differently, needed to have other formats for inclusion, et cetera. So just something as a recent example that occurred in June to share with you. You may see sometimes Extension use other than DEI, DEIA, DEIAJ, DEIAB. So ours is diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging. If you see the J, it's often typically for justice. So real quick, a few ideas on how Extension can help. Asset mapping, facilitation. Believe it or not, facilitation is a skill. Just because it's one of those things where we know not everyone should necessarily be, teaching a course, right? There are people that are really focused on research and they're great researchers, but they don't necessarily, think about innovation, et cetera, when it's delivering that. So how do you make those connections? Our folks are very well-versed in facilitation. Impact analysis is one, whether it's economic or impacts. Stakeholder meetings, our folks are very good about helping coordinate those. Transdisciplinary approach. So if you are curious about what this is, I would just reference you to you could type in WVU Mon Forest, and it will bring up the Mon Forest Towns program. It was a transdisciplinary approach, involved a number of colleges across campus, and was very much embedded in the community. Community capitals framework, similar to the diagram that Kristi had up there. You can see there are different ways that we can actually influence community capitals, whether that's social capital, that might be built capital, environmental capital. So we can take you through that as a consideration. I mentioned the DEIB. Survey, research, and focus groups, really important to be able to connect with folks, and there are lots of ways to go about doing that. And then, of course, through CCE, already mentioned, community engaged scholarship. And so that takes you through a little bit of Extension. I'll leave this slide up here in case anyone wants to jot down any of this information, but it will be available for you in your slides. And with that, I will turn it over to Trina. Did see that there are a couple of questions that came through in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Boy, I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose, and I've been working with you guys for a while. So, um, I'm going to circle back to a question that Deborah Stein asked Kristi about community benefits agreements. And those are often called for in DOE, Department of Energy solicitations. And so she's asking about the community benefits agreements and how they're enforced. And also just what were some of the biggest mistakes that you see that scientists and engineers make when engaging with community members? So let's take those first two questions, community benefits and then mistakes.
Okay. As far as the community benefits plan that you're designing, there is no required agreements in those plans. A community agreement is outside of what the plan may be. So you could allude to discussions you've had with groups or partnerships that you will create. But if you have an official agreement, that obviously raises the bar of your community benefits plan. And that would obviously be a signed agreement. So those things are great to have in place. I'm going to allude back to what Tony said, start now. If you already know your community, you already know folks, it's easier than to get these things on the timeline that you're going to be required to do to submit. So that's one on that one. As far as things that I've seen that have scored low or that are areas of concern, number one is that consistency. So saying, even in your plan that you're going to do a one-stop kind of go in and tell them about this at a town hall one time, or you may send flyers out, or those kind of inconsistent ways of kind of communicating, looking like it's just a checkbox kind of consistency there. That's probably one of the first ones. I also have seen folks that have not really connected the work they're doing to the stakeholders and the outcomes that they're working with in the community. So really not understanding the community and going ahead and writing a plan around how you think you will move forward. And it doesn't connect with the community, because that's the first thing you do as a reviewer is you review yourself, the community, to make sure that the plan is in line. So probably those two things. Sorry.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, Kristi, I mean, you're exactly right. One of the considerations is it's easy for us to be passionate about the work that we do, and we have to understand that people don't always understand the work that we do, let alone the applications that it may have. I would say that one other thing would be careful of over-promising and under-delivering, because we recognize that while we may be engaged in research, right, that doesn't mean that that research is necessarily going to lead to specific changes that community may need, right? So just be cognizant of that. Like, it may be the goal, right? We may make improvements there, but just as we were talking about water, I would not want to promise Kermit, West Virginia, for instance, that we're going to, be the saviors and improve their water system, because we don't necessarily have those resources. We can provide the information that can be used to leverage resources, but we won't necessarily do it ourselves.
I did not see any other questions in the chat, so I'm just going to put it out there to the group. And unfortunately, I think, Tony, I think you still might be sharing the slides, so I can't see everybody to see if somebody's going to raise a hand or, okay. Do we have a question from anyone else in the group online?
Trina, this is Debbie Stein again. I did post a question in chat there for Tony.
Okay.
About medical transportation and health conditions. So Tony's familiar with the Bridge Initiative, I believe, because he worked on a study we did in the past. And the one that we're looking at now is looking at the kind of transportation challenges that people with health conditions face, in West Virginia. This is specifically focusing on healthcare, chronic healthcare activity. So that's like diabetes and COPD, things like that. And so I was, sort of wondering if that, issue came up in the discussions he was talking about. I mean, one thing we really found in bringing the transportation health community together is that each doesn't really know that much about the other. So I thought it'd be good to know what's occurring there.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the answer is yes. We included WVU Medicine as part of our workshop. In PA, they included Allegheny Hospital as part of theirs. And what we found there is that people are finding challenges just to get to their local department. And here's the thing, with many of these chronic health conditions, et cetera, you might need more specific care. So now not only do you not have transportation to get to maybe the local clinic or local hospital that WVU, UPMC, whoever happens to own, you definitely can't get to the main one. So how do we manage care at the community-based level and navigate this? So yes, it actually is something that came up. I appreciate you asking that question, and love knowing that the Bridge Initiative is working on it, because we'll connect you, with this particular study. This was a planning. I think there is a plan for potential implementation, that hasn't been decided yet. But the other person, the PI for WVU on this, is David Martinelli out of engineering.
And so we got another new one coming in. Let's see, it's a resource for WV's Comprehensive Cancer Coalition, Mountains of Hope, that Amy Allen just posted for everyone. And so this is gonna bring us to the challenge, the community engagement. And I'm gonna go first, actually, because I've been thinking a lot about this too. And Deborah, the example that you bring up, and Tony, that you bring up, I had a researcher come to me for an EV, an electric vehicle kind of demonstration program. And it had to have at least 2 communities involved. And I asked him right at the outset, what communities are you thinking about and why? And he of course thought about Morgantown, and Morgantown's been a little bit of a tough nut to crack, right? But he didn't know about Fairmont. And Fairmont's really been at the forefront of electric vehicle transportation in their public transit authority, because I've been working with them on something called Rural Reimagined. And I started going to the West Virginia Public Transit Authority's annual meetings. So I know that they do micro transit. And so I'm thinking, shoot, if we could have tied the EV public demo with something to do with healthcare that you guys are aware of, with Fairmont specifically, because I know they're engaged in this, because I've been developing that relationship, maybe we might have come up with a really interesting rural application that the DOE might have been really interested in, that goes beyond what we typically think of with public transportation, where we're thinking largely about buses. Like, I had no idea about this micro transit stuff. So that would be one idea, that if a faculty member were to come back to me again and say, hey, I'm looking at this EV thing, I might be reaching out to you guys saying, hey, what relationships do you have? Here's what I have. What can we put together? Here's what the faculty member brings, and pull together a really impactful plan. So with that as the first idea out there, and Tony, you used a term about belonging. What is meant by the belonging term that you used?
All right, so as an example, I don't know how many people here might be familiar with Huntington, but Huntington created an initiative, actually as part of our partnership with them almost 10 years ago, called Open to All. And so this idea of belonging, do you feel that you are welcome in the community you're in? Do you feel that your community values your values? Are you supported? So what is that sense of belonging? Because that's where people are going to stay, right? That's why belonging is so important for us, because we've seen the struggle to stay. You may have remembered that NPR series, West Virginia NPR series. So many of our young people were leaving. All right. So one of the things that Kristi mentioned, cultural competency, is actually designed to do just that, to talk about let's focus on the things that we have in common. Let's focus on the ways that our community can grow and be open to all.
Okay, thank you, Tony.
I just want to add really quickly that it's not just diversity in terms of race, ethnicity, etc., identity. It's also just your understanding, your views, your perspectives. Those all also are included in that belonging piece. Are you heard when you say something that is unique to a common theme in a community?
Right. Do we have any takers on the community benefits challenge? We have any researchers right now who are struggling with figuring out how to take what they view as and probably as highly specialized research and how to bridge that to some sort of community benefit, and see how Tony and Kristi might react to that? Do we have any volunteers? All right, I'm going to throw one out while you guys are thinking. We have time maybe for two. I work with faculty who develop specialty materials for batteries, improved batteries. They need a community benefits program. They may be partnering with one small company in West Virginia that might be in rural West Virginia. So with that as background, what do you think they could do that would be an impactful community benefits program?
These are your battery manufacturers, correct?
Battery, well, yeah, I've got battery researchers who are developing, I mean, so specific, it's like, we're going to develop a new molecule for a cathode. Okay. And then they got to figure out how's that going to benefit the community. But they do have a partner who is a small business in that community in battery manufacturing. So what would a community benefits program look like there that would have that broader community engagement? Do you have any ideas?
I'll just quickly say one thing, and this goes for many of them, but especially in kind of this area. Just saying it like that to a community, it's depending on age and what their interests are, that may not go very far. It may hit a wall like battery, I don't know, go whatever. But what you need to do is engage in a unique way of seeing how the impact is going to benefit this community, and start then maybe even with your youth. So talking about this potentially in get in with your 4-H clubs, get in with your groups and say, hey, listen, we have really cool outcomes that can happen from this process with this change in batteries. What does that even mean? Let's talk about that and excite and engage them early so that they go home talking about it to their families. That way, when you then introduce it to the community, you have a broader audience. Just one suggestion.
So one thing to think about community benefits is all the ways that it might be able to improve community health, well-being, right, economic, et cetera. So, one obviously is jobs, but you want to be cognizant of the fact that you don't want to promise jobs, especially if there's no manufacturing site built yet, because how long is that going to take? And there's no guarantee that it will come. Right. But think about, for instance, we recognize that if we're talking about climate shift, right, there's going to be greater risk of having these very, let's say, focused floods. And what's going to happen is we get floods, derechos or straight line winds that knock out power. Would these battery resources ultimately be able to be used to help store energy so that we have access to energy in the event that we have this occur? Because bear in mind, rural communities are the ones who get the last assistance, right? They start where the most populated areas are. So that could be one, just as an example. And you got to think some of these rural communities have nursing homes because we have older populations. They certainly have schools that might be critical for people having a sense of well-being and normalcy. Those are types of things that I would immediately think of.
So I guess the take home for me is the next time I have a faculty member say, hey, I've got this very specific thing and I'm not sure where to start, I'm calling Tony and Kristi and we're going to have a little sit down with a faculty member and just start brainstorming around that idea. Do we have anybody else?
Well, we are actually at time, Trina. I want to draw your attention to 1 minute left. But Amy Allen did post something in the chat that hopefully you can follow up, Amy, with Kristi and Tony, or connect with others in this group around that.
Sure, happy
Absolutely.
to.
And it was a good note, Trina, to end with the brainstorming thing. Honestly, there are so many pieces that not even Tony and I could come up with on our own. It takes a whole group of people with perspectives varying in all angles to think of those pieces that you might be missing. So always bring other people into your conversation.
Well, thank you guys. Really appreciate your time. And Brooke, I appreciate this opportunity to bring this to the broader community.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody who attended. Kristi and Tony for the amazing presentations that I'll be referring back to myself. And I hope to see everyone here at future local science engagement network events.